everybody, welcome back. This is Rasati in Singapore. Glad to have you back on the Night Owl podcast, and I'm actually really happy to have you here because, as always, it's my musings. It's how I feel about life. It's what I've learned through conversations, through movies, through music, and I actually really enjoy talking out my thoughts a little bit. It helps me sort them out and also helps you maybe get a different perspective on life. So today I really want to talk to you a little bit about this idea I had based on a piece of art I saw in the Singapore Art Museum, also known as SAM. It was a couple of years ago, actually, back when we were doing science tours and doing art tours in SAM itself. And it was an installation that was along a staircase. It was like a winding staircase almost, and it took up the entire wall. It was so pretty. And honestly, I don't even know how to explain it except it was a bunch of round mirrors. But the concept behind it was really beautiful. It was almost like bubble theory. So the idea being that there was an entire cosmos out there full of people's worlds, and the worlds were full and complete in and of themselves. They're complete circles, but they're close to other people's worlds. So maybe you can look into someone else's world, but you don't actually share anything. You don't share a border. You don't touch at all. You kind of don't cross your bubble border or boundary, right? So I think that was really a beautiful way to kind of illustrate the fact that our psyches are a lot like that. For the most part, we grow up in our own little bubble, right? Our idea that our family is the best, our family does it well, this is the way the world is, and we just, we have a magnificent existence, if you will. And then suddenly you start to learn about, different cultures and different races and different people and the way different people think. And honestly, I thought everything was great until I started asking questions about, well, in my family, this is what they do. What do you do in your family? So as I was getting to know people and getting to understand what family culture was kind of like, I realized that there was a better way to do things in my family, which is when I started questioning stuff, I started pushing boundaries, and that's when I started basically to become a pain in the ass, right? But the idea that I thought was so beautiful about this mirrored installation in SAM was it's very deep and philosophical and spiritual almost to a point, because this is exactly how all of us move about the world. We're all in our little bubbles. If you think about it, like walking down the street, unless you're actually speaking with somebody, if you're walking down the street, you basically have your headphones in, you're kind of like watching the world as you move through it with your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own problems, basically, right? So it's not until you stop and start speaking to somebody that you kind of share some of those ideas and maybe converse a little bit back and forth about what could be, what should be, what shouldn't be, all those things. So with that in mind, I really thought about the way that I coach and the way that I approach people. And for the most part, when people come to me as clients, or maybe even as friends, most people come to me as friends first and they say, hey, I need a little bit of help. Can you, what do you think of this? Or how do you feel about that? So they come to me with an idea. And for the most part, they're in their head thinking, I've got this covered. I've thought about it backwards and forwards. I've thought about it inside out. I think I've got everything covered. And when I come to it with a different angle, a different point of view, it means that we are almost merging bubbles. But for the most part, they're very protective. They're very protective of their ideas. One to one, they're not going to let you tell them that it's a bad idea. They're not going to let you put them down. But that doesn't mean you can't plant the seed, and that's also very dangerous. So I think it's really just beautiful about the idea of bubbles and the fact that we all have our own little bubble and we're very quite protective of that bubble. There are a lot of us, though, that feel shattered when somebody gives us a different point of view. Maybe we asked for advice, maybe we didn't. And a lot of times when we ask for advice, we don't necessarily expect for someone to say, yeah, well, you need to change. You can't remain the same. But that's essentially what happens. Whether you get new information or not, something's going to change inside of you where you can't be the person you were 5 minutes ago. If I talk to you about coffee and you let me know that, there's such a thing as Kopi Luwak, and I had no idea before now, I'm going to be a little taken aback. I'm going to be a little different afterwards, because going forward now, I'm going to wonder about Kopi Luwak versus regular coffee. And then you got the 3-in-1 mixes, and you got the home brew and the drip and all that stuff. It's really cool, but it's going to change me fundamentally, because I can't go back to thinking about coffee the same way without considering the fact that there is bat poop coffee out there as well. Honestly, it's like that for a lot of things. It's like that for a lot of our deeply held beliefs. How men and women are supposed to act. What are the roles inside of a household? You grew up watching your parents day in and day out, which means that's really ingrained in your head about what marriage looks like. Most of the time, you understand that normal is what happens in your house. You never consider until you start speaking to people that what's happening in your house may not be normal at all. You may be an outlier. It may be so abusive and so hurtful in your house that you don't know what's okay and what's not okay until you start speaking to people. It's not that I want you to be afraid of what's going on in your house. It's not that I want you to be worried, but I do want you to consider what actually normal is. Normal isn't what they put on TV. Normal is far from what the media talks about. Normal, if you ask my opinion, would be, let's take into account the people around you. But not just all of one race. I would want you, if I were to do a survey, right? If I wanted to publish results about, how the public feels about certain things, I'd want to do a survey that includes every race, every culture, every language, every economic status, because each of them have their own ways of managing things. And I want to make sure then that I get a pretty good idea of what normal is. Think about it this way. When I was growing up, we're Sri Lankan Tamils, right? And we stuck to our family. Wherever we grew up, wherever we lived, and I lived in a lot of places, there was generally a Sri Lankan population there. And we hung out with our Jaffna people, right? So what happens is, if I get in trouble at home, the first thing my mom and dad are going to do is call the aunts and uncles. And that damn news spread like wildfire, which means the next time I go see them, they're going to reiterate the same shit my mom and dad told me about how I'm terrible and I'm not responsible, I'm not thinking about other people's feelings, and I'm, Mana Maryada, I'm letting everybody down, the family, respect, the Gautam, all that stuff. That becomes like a reiterated, reinforced idea. Why? Because it's within the same circle. So I have my bubble, that's my house. And then I have the family bubble because my dad's brothers and sisters grew up the same way that he did, obviously. And my mom's brothers grew up the same way she did, obviously. And when the two come together, they reinforce each other. So that bubble is a little bit bigger, right? But they're going to reinforce the fact that this is normal. Beating your kid is normal. Telling them off 100 times in a row and comparing your child to other people's children, that's normal, right? They don't think about the complexes they're giving us, but they consider that normal because that's what they grew up with. But imagine, if you will, right, me going to a school in a different country, in several different countries with several different cultures to assimilate to. I had the chance to ask a lot of people what was normal. Or I had the chance to listen to people who were complaining about what was normal and what wasn't. So when I talk to you about bubble theory, and this is my theory, by the way, I'm not I'm not quoting somebody else's stuff. This is something I just coined, like just now. When I talk to you about bubble theory, that goes for our parents as well. They feel this entire identity about how the world works, and now that they are settled and it's been reinforced a couple times, they're content with the fact that this is the way it works. So when we are taught way more information and we come to them with more questions than they have answers for, we tend to burst their bubble a little bit, which is why a lot of times when you attack someone's identity, whether you mean to or not, saying something that could, disprove anything that they've believed in will feel like an attack. And that's why they lash out in anger. They lash out with, violence sometimes. They really want to push back on it because they don't want to consider that maybe they've been doing something wrong. They don't want to consider that maybe they've been led down the wrong path. So this is something just for you to consider for yourselves. This is a new perspective I wanted to put out there. If you have any questions or concerns, please drop them in the comments as always. I'm happy to listen and feedback. But in the meantime, I really hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. I love you. Bye.